Hey, good afternoon. Morning, I guess I should say. Not quite afternoon yet. 11:23 right now. I wanted to jump on, and I figured I'd use this time to just kind of update things for you with what we're looking at, what may happen here across the region. There's been some updates. We kind of been thinking this would play out, and it's turning a bit as expected here, but we're not out of the woods. So thought I'd jump on and just say, hey, let's talk through what's going on and what's happening here. If you haven't done so yet here, download the app right here. You can scan it, or I think you can even maybe pop up there in the chat or whatnot as a way for you to connect it. Look for Apple and Android devices. It's a great app to have. This is the weather app. Remember, we have two apps here. We have the news app and the weather app. The weather app will give you individualized alerts for your location. You program it that, so if something happens, you can certainly do that and download it, program your location in there. As we are logging on, let me know in the chat where you are watching from. If you have any questions, things of that, I'll answer those at the end, of course, but thought I'd use this time to kind of chat about things and see what's going on. So again, remember that app in the corner here? There it is, that corner right there. Maybe you're on a computer, you can scan that with your phone or just search in your Android or Apple devices. Even if you have an iPad, maybe you don't have a cell phone, you have an iPad or a device like that, you can download this app that could maybe give you an alert if something happened. And not just today, but anytime. It'll give you the cold weather alerts, the storm alerts, things of that. So that is something worth noting. From the chat here, getting some folks checking in from all over. We've got George is checking in Farmer City. James is down in Allerton. We've got Jessica over in Springfield checking on in. And we've got Tiffany in Ogden. I'll do two more here. And let's see, we've got Martha up in Gibson City, and we've got Timothy over in Georgetown. Thanks for jumping in for us here. Let's jump to the graphics and talk about what we're looking at. This is our latest update here. Really, it's a very much a low confidence but potential high impact scenario where if we get just one or two storms, and that still is a question. We may walk through this without any storms here. If a storm forms, though, there's a lot of instability, a lot of ingredients in place where it could become quickly severe with large hail and tornadoes. This is not a widespread outbreak for us in central Illinois, but there could be a zone somewhere that becomes a problem for us. That's why I'm calling the tornado threat localized. If a storm forms, we got to watch it very closely. The hail threat as well. There could be some big hail here in the region with those storms, including here in central Illinois, if one of those storms pop here. We're not saying no storms. We're saying that we really just have to watch hour by hour for this to unfold to see what's going on. One of the reasons for that is this unusual setup for us in central Illinois. First off, our jet streak overhead, really about the spot you would want for some sort of severe weather to take hold here. And in this region is where we would see upward motion intensified a bit. So that jet streak aloft allows for some rising motion to really take place right in and north of our region. When we get down to the surface, we are continuing to see that jet stream overhead. There's a dry line at the surface that's taking hold. And so that is certainly something that's unusual. Dry line setups are more typical for the Great Plains. If you think of some of those classic supercell setups, if you think of some of those setups that have yielded big storms in the Great Plains, they're very photogenic looking and very intense. It's a dry line that does it. We rarely get the dry line here in central Illinois. Now, some of you may be asking, what is a dry line? Let's talk about it here. We'll go through our fronts pretty quickly. We know what a cold front is. Cold front divides warm air. We've got a cold front coming late tonight. That's in place. A warm front, warm air is to the south, lifting in, displaces some of that colder air. A stationary front, there's not much movement on either side. We get an occluded front. They're rarely talked about. We don't really worry about that for storm potential. But then the last thing is the dry line. This is not dividing air masses. It is actually dividing moisture. We've got dry air on the left side of the dry line. Behind it, on the east side, the right side, there is humidity. And when we look at our dew point values here, let me see if I can find my humidity graphic real quick. When we look at those dew point values, it's actually very interesting to see that some of those areas that are hitting 80 today are actually behind that dry line. And Springfield, Taylorville, Jacksonville, those areas may certainly be on tap for some really warm weather with some of that sunshine that's starting to break on through. When we look at the atmospheric fuel, you can almost see that dry line. It's settling in somewhere in our area, 5, 6 o'clock. We get the sun to go down. You can sometimes see storms pop on there. We only need 1 or 2 to really cause problems. One storm could be memorable here. One storm more than likely doesn't impact you, but the chance is low. It's not 0, but if we get that storm and it is coming at you, then certainly we have to watch where that is. So just a very unique setup that's unfolding for us here. When we look at our future track, some of the guidance has said it keeps things pretty dry here. It tries to fire some storms locally, but we don't really see that. You can see here we get to 10, 11 o'clock where before the front gets through, maybe there's a storm. That's why we're keeping that broader window from 3 p.m. till midnight for it. This particular guidance says, hey, watch out Effingham. Does that mean Effingham gets a storm? No, I don't think so. Some other guidance has been teasing. Let's see if this one shows it up. See right there, 5:30, it says, wow, look at that one storm popping up between Champaign and Danville. Does that mean that storm is by Champaign or Danville? No, it does not. The trend is our friend in these scenarios, and it suggests that if we get a storm, it will be isolated, not interacting with other storms, and that could allow it to become severe pretty quickly here into the region. I will say the odds maybe are coming down that happens. I'll give it a 20% chance, and we can see that our severe weather risk has been trimmed back for a chunk of the area. We're at a marginal risk. The one thing to mention about severe weather risk is they are not necessarily focused on intensity, but in coverage areas. We have had plenty of marginal risk days where we've had one storm cause problems in the area. That still may happen. It's not out of the blue that would be the case. But if we look across the region, certainly the risk, while maybe locally has gone down due to a confidence decrease, elsewhere it's actually increased quite a bit. There's now a large enhanced risk in southern Illinois to southern Indiana along the Ohio River Valley there. And there's also another enhanced risk in northern Illinois from 2 different things. When we break it down based on the tornado risk here, what you'll see is the tornado risk still north of I-74 is at a 4. We'll keep it at a 3 across the viewing area. It's at a 7, though, down in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, where maybe the odds are a little higher for those tornadoes, where there could be a strong tornado. If we were to get a storm, even in the 3 area, though, we'd have to watch out and keep an eye on things here for us as this front comes on through. Certainly is just a little bit of an unusual setup where in all the time I've grown up around here, very rare to see this setup, which does lend to some confidence issues. We're not sold on exactly what may happen, and so we'll leave some surprises in place. Now, the dry line is where those storms may develop. The one thing to note, though, is the cold front, it will be delayed behind that, and you can see the cold front sliding on through. We're talking about 7, 8 p.m. through about midnight or so. Look at the change in those temperatures. By tomorrow morning, you are going to wake up and hate it. Temperatures heading down to the low to middle 20s here across the region certainly is something to keep an eye on. And yes, I haven't talked about it much, but there could be a dusting of snow that falls for some of us here across the region with the band coming through. If you're up early enough, a dusting, you might see some of that snow fall, but if you maybe get up at 6, 7 o'clock, it might be out of here by then. So some of us may not see those flurries, but I won't discount that for us before all is said and done. So again, a low probability, high impact scenario, low confidence, high impact scenario where we think most of us probably don't have to worry about it. If there was just a single storm that formed on that dry line, though, it could really cause some problems quickly for us. Does that happen? I can't say yes or no. Where does it happen? I can't tell you that either. I can say, though, that the dry line is setting up somewhere in our area, the boundary that divides that humid, unstable air with that dry air. And if something forms in that, it could take advantage of some pretty impressive parameters here across the region. The odds of event causing problems in multiple counties seems low, but we may have a strip or 2 of issues somewhere. So while I don't want to say you're fine, I think the odds of anyone watching seeing a storm is low. But if you get that storm, it could be a high impact event for you. So that's just something that I think is the safest way to explain that for us here. So tornado threat, while localized, if we get that individual storm somewhere, we just got to watch it closely. Hail would be a certain thing for us, certainly something to watch and keep an eye on here as we move on through. Let's pull up our dew points real quick. Let's see if we can spot that dry line. I don't know if we can. We might not be able to. Maybe we can spot it on our map here. Okay, it's actually showing up a little bit in place. I'm going to draw some fronts on here. Our cold front is where all that dry air is up north. Oops, draw that the wrong way. Let me redo that. There we go. So our cold front, let me try that one more time here. There's our cold front. It's off in southeast Iowa right now. You can see that there's humid air. Dew point is 60 in Effingham, but 40 in Columbia, Missouri. There's two different air masses that are in place there. So if you look at the dry line, that dry line right now is kind of settling in somewhere west of us. With time, that dry line will move to the east. We'll see it work its way to the east, dividing my warm, humid air mass in front and the hot, dry air mass in the back there. When that dry line comes on through, as we go through the day, this dry line will move to the east. Once that dry line is through, you're done with the severe weather risk. So Springfield, your odds are lower. I think we have to watch 6, 7 o'clock. By then, it should be well to the east of you. We get to the I-57 corridor. Once that passes on through, then the severe weather risk is in front of it. It's not behind it. It's in front of it. Even as that front is charging its way to the south and east, that dry line is actually going to be what we watch for to see that severe weather risk pop on. And it's to the west of us now. And what we may see happen is we look at the highs for the day. Let me bring those up really quick. You see where we've got Springfield, Taylorville, Jacksonville at 80. There could be some spots over there that hit 81, 82 because they're in a very dry air mass. Dry air heats up a lot better than humid air. Think of some of those last couple of days. Yesterday, for instance, dew points were really low yesterday. We warmed up so fast and just blew that forecast out of the water. That may happen for some low 80s along the I-55 corridor, where it's more humid air. You think of the summertime, we generally don't get into the 90s and 100s around here all that often. When it's really humid, we'll hit the 90s, but when it's dry out, we can see those temperatures climb a lot more. That allows for warm days and cool nights, so that's something certainly worth watching and keeping an eye on. So we'll keep an eye on it. How does it play out exactly? Still, there are some questions. If we were looking at where the greatest risk is, it's going to be a big hail event in the Chicago, northwest side of Chicago, northern Illinois up there. Maybe the better tornado chance for confidence is in southern Illinois, southern Indiana. We are thinking we may scrape through, but if we get one storm, people could remember that one storm. And that could certainly be a scenario that unfolds where just one storm is all it takes to cause problems for someone here in our region. And if we don't get any storm, that's probably the best case scenario for this setup that's in our region here. Very much a little bit of a headache for us, I guess I'd say. I'm sure my colleagues would agree with that. I'm going to kind of zoom in here a little bit, pull up the future track, kind of illustrate that really quick before we go. And I'll have full update again on WCIA 3 News at noon. But when you watch here, I need to delete that. There we go. That way I can zoom in. When you watch here, you'll see a couple of things happen. 3, 4, 5 o'clock, you can see those storms starting to pop in northern Illinois. That northern area is going to be the zone worth watching for the initial stuff here. And that's going to be kind of in that area. Let me close the line there for you. Somewhere up north, and I probably drew my line a little further north there. We'll trim it down. That zone, probably going to see some big hail, especially Rockford, LaSalle, Peru. You get up towards DeKalb, Chicago west and northwest side, even into Chicago, depending on where those storms go. That certainly is the first area to watch. You can see those cluster of storms continuing to north. As that is happening, look to the south. We'll back it up a little bit. You can start to see some storms firing just south of our area and into Missouri. That may be a single storm, Mount Vernon, Marion, somewhere down there that causes some problems. And then the cluster of storms continues to strengthen off to the east. By that point, the front is through. You can see some of those snow showers trying to graze through our area with maybe a little sleet and mix. But tomorrow will at least be sunny, even though it's going to be bitter cold. So that is certainly something worth keeping an eye on. All right, that is my update for you here. If there's any questions, I'm going to go back and answer some of those, kind of ask around those, see what's happening here. Block that. There we go. Let's see. Looks like not a whole lot of questions popping up. I think we get the idea. It just takes 1 or 2 storms to cause some problems for us. Whether we get that or not, we'll see. We don't get dry line setups all that often around here, so there's some uncertainty with that. Usually dry line setups can really allow for some rampant storms to develop. We may have a lid of warm air aloft that keeps that from happening. One way we can break through that, if we get sunshine and we get those temperatures warm enough, combined with some cooling aloft, that may help to spark a storm. But oftentimes, too, when you have that cap in place, if you get a dry line, those storms can stay individualized. It's not a squall coming through. It's not a derecho coming through like we had last summer. It's a single storm here or there, and you could have one or two in a 150-mile span. So, that could be our entire viewing area has one or two storms. So you can think of that. The odds of you getting hit by one or two storms maybe is low, but if you do get hit by that storm, big hail, maybe a tornado risk with that. So I hope that makes sense. Seeing some questions about that cap popping in. Thinking also that we are kind of watching when that dry line comes through. That kind of ends the risk for us. Where the storms are in Chicago, I think there'll be some big hail up there. The Chicago area probably sees not as big of a tornado risk with those storms if they're along the cold front. The overnight round maybe has the greatest potential along the Ohio River Valley. So we will see and keep you updated on that. Ooh, here's a good question. Do the roads freeze tomorrow? Let me switch back to the graphics real quick for you here. That's actually a great question. Something we look at here for talking about those road conditions. What happens to the moisture? What happens to that? Let me pull up my wind gust model here. First off, one thing that can aid, see our wind gust here? Midnight, 3, 6, 7, 10, 11, 12. Wind gusts are 30, 40, 50 mile an hour perhaps at times out there. When you have strong winds, that air movement can often help evaporate that moisture, and that typically means slick spots aren't as expected. There may be a couple of spots, but it's not going to be a big flash freeze that everything shuts down and whatnot. The wind will really help with any moisture that's on the road. And our ground is still warm too. So if there was a slick spot or two, it might be the bridges that could have that issue. But again, I really think that wind is going to help us out with that. It's a strong temp drop though. You're right. Let me go to I showed you temperature. I'm going to show you wind chill. Some of you are going to drop your jaw looking at this here. You can see, we were in maybe the 80s at some point for some of us this afternoon. We go from 80 in Springfield to tomorrow morning, the wind chill of 5. Good grief, right? That's a 75 drop. So that's worth a mention, right? Tomorrow morning, there you are, folks. Wind chill out. It's going to be bitter cold out. A lot of you are going to be shocked by just how much of a drastic change it is. But that is the weather as we know it in Illinois. That's all I got time for. Best message, closing message is, for the most part, I think we're going to be okay, but one or two spots could very well have an issue if a storm develops. Once the dry line passes by, if you notice the air does not feel as humid, then you're good. One way you can look at that, figure out the dew point value near you. You can actually look at the dew point values updated every hour on the WCIA 3 weather map room, or use your weather app. If the dew point has dropped substantially, your risk is over. That's one way you can tell yourself. That happens earlier to the west, later to the east. If you do get a storm or you hear some thunder, that should maybe bring a concern between 3 p.m. and 11 p.m. because that's maybe our window where if something happens, it could happen very quickly. We're going to have a full team watching things and whatnot, keeping an eye on it. So that's kind of some tips for keeping advice and things like that. That's what I got time for. I got a show in 18 minutes from now. Catch me on WCIA 3 News at noon. Adam has updated the web article with the latest info. We'll have another update with Kevin and Seth this afternoon and evening as we continue to keep an eye on here. It's mainly, we got babysit. Just watch. Make sure something doesn't happen. But if it does, we will be there. I'll be in the storm tracker. Seth and Kevin will be around. Adam will be keeping an eye on things too, and we'll keep you updated. That's all I got. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.